Let's talk about precision engineering for behavior. In our field, we don't just try things, we measure, analyze, and apply exact pressure to shape outcomes. Differential reinforcement is your primary mechanism for change, reinforcing a desired behavior while simultaneously withholding reinforcement for an undesired one. But here is where the novice separates from the expert: selection. Look at the instruments laid out here: the calipers, the micrometer. Think of DRO, DRA, and DRI exactly like these tools. Each one serves a distinct high-precision function. You wouldn't use a micrometer to measure a standard wall stud, and you wouldn't use a simple DRI when a rate-based procedure is actually required to manage a high-frequency behavior. We are going to build a rigorous decision-making framework so you can look at any behavioral topography and immediately know which tool to pull from your kit to get the job done right. Let's get to work. If you strip away every complex protocol we use in behavior analysis, what you're left with is this fundamental engine. This is the heartbeat of differential reinforcement. Focus your attention on the starting point on the left. Every moment presents a behavioral choice, a literal fork in the road for the learner. Follow the solid blue arrow upward first. This is your primary objective. When the client engages in the desired behavior, we meet it with that big blue plus sign. We reinforce it. We make sure that specific action is profitable for them. We are teaching them that this path works. Now, drop down to the dotted gray line. This is where the discipline comes in. For other behaviors, the maladaptive ones or the distractions, we apply the prohibited sign. We put those behaviors on extinction. This doesn't just mean ignoring them. It means cutting off the fuel supply. We ensure that path yields absolutely zero results. This is the strategic difference. We aren't just hoping for good behavior. We are engineering an environment where the right choice pays off and the wrong choice hits a dead end. By consistently amplifying the signal and muting the noise, you create clear differentiation. That is how you drive behavioral change that actually sticks. Effective behavior analysis isn't just about memorizing acronyms. It's about knowing exactly which tool fits the specific job in front of you. Think of your intervention strategy like a mechanic's cabinet. If you grab a hammer when you need a wrench, you aren't fixing the engine, you're breaking it. Let's organize your mental workspace into 3 distinct drawers based on the outcome you need. Start with the red drawer on the far left. Notice that power button icon? That is your cue. This drawer is strictly for elimination. When a behavior is dangerous or completely impedes learning, and the goal is to bring it to absolute zero, you open this drawer. Your tool here is DRO, Differential Reinforcement of Other Behavior. You aren't teaching a new skill here. You are simply rewarding the absence of the problem. Now, shift your eyes to the middle blue drawer. See the swapping arrows? This is replacement. This is the most crucial drawer for long-term growth because we aren't just stopping something, we are teaching a functional alternative to take its place. Here, you'll find DRI and DRA. If a student hits to get attention, we don't just want the hitting to stop. We need to teach them to tap a shoulder instead. Finally, look at the gray drawer on the right with the speedometer. This is for adjustment. Sometimes a behavior is perfectly fine in nature, but the intensity is off. Think of this like a volume knob. We don't want to mute the student, we just need to tune the frequency. Whether you need to ramp a behavior up with DRH or taper it down to a reasonable level with DRL or DRD, this is where you fine-tune the existing skill. Mastering this slide means knowing that before you pick an acronym, you must first decide, are you stopping, swapping, or tuning? Imagine you have a behavior that is so frequent or dangerous, you simply need it to stop immediately. That is where differential reinforcement of other behaviors, or DRO, becomes your primary elimination tool. I want you to focus on the core function on the left. The magic word here is absence. Unlike other methods where we reward a specific good action, with DRO, we are rewarding the silence. We set a timer, that's your trigger, and if that interval passes with absolutely zero occurrences of the problem, reinforcement is delivered. It doesn't matter what else the client was doing, as long as the problem behavior didn't happen. Look at the clinical snapshot on the right for the application. Brian isn't waiting for his son to use a fork perfectly. He is simply reinforcing the fact that food is not being thrown. This is why we use DRO for dangerous or high-rate behaviors that require an immediate decrease. However, catch the critical warning at the bottom right. DRO creates a behavioral vacuum. It stops the bad, but it does not automatically teach the good. It fails to teach a replacement behavior. So while you use this to put out the fire, you must pair it with skill teaching. Otherwise, you're just left with a void where the behavior used to be. Now we're opening drawer 2, and this is where we shift from reactive management to proactive teaching. We call this the replacement behavior pair, because in our line of work, you never just remove a behavior. You have to fill that vacuum with something better. That's where DRI and DRA come into play. These are your heavy lifters for skill building. The strategy here is simultaneous. You are actively reinforcing the new positive skill while placing the old problematic behavior on extinction. You're essentially starving the bad habit while feeding the good one. But how do you distinguish between the two? I want you to lock in on that framed box at the bottom. This is the single most important diagnostic you will run in your head. Can the old and new behaviors happen at the same time? If the answer is no, physically impossible, like you cannot clap your hands and hit your desk at the exact same moment, that is a physically incompatible behavior. That's DRI. If the answer is yes, meaning the new behavior is just a better alternative, like raising your hand instead of shouting out, that is DRA. Master this specific question, and you will never confuse these two interventions again. Let's reach into the second drawer of our toolkit and pull out a strategy that relies on simple physics, differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors, or DRI. The logic here is brilliant in its simplicity. We aren't just asking a client to stop a behavior, we are reinforcing a new action that makes the problem behavior physically impossible to perform. Focus your attention on the core function. The key phrase here is topographically incompatible. That is the technical way of saying you cannot do X if you are doing Y. You can't clap your hands and pick your nose at the same time. One action physically prohibits the other. Look to the right at the clinical snapshot for the perfect application of this. We have a serious safety risk, a child dangling their feet over the water. A standard correction might fail here. Instead, the mother uses DRI by teaching the child to sit crisscross applesauce or firmly flat on the dock. Why does this work? Because human anatomy dictates that you cannot sit cross-legged and dangle your legs simultaneously. The new safe behavior physically displaces the dangerous one. As you consider the clinical use case, remember that DRI is your go-to for safety issues where you need 100% prevention. However, heed the warning at the bottom. This is a precise tool. It is not always easy to find a replacement behavior that is mutually exclusive to the problem, but when you can identify one, it is incredibly effective. We're opening the second drawer of our behavioral toolkit now. We're moving past simple reduction and focusing on replacement with differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors, the DRA. Focus on the core function on the left. The strategy here is active. We aren't just trying to stop a behavior, we are actively fueling a specific desirable substitute. Now, look closely at the reinforcement trigger, because this is where the professional distinction lies. In a DRA, the alternative behavior creates the payout. But here is the critical nuance. The problem behavior and the new behavior can coexist physically. Shift your eyes to the clinical snapshot to see this in action. We have Blaine. He pulls his mother's shirt for attention. We ignore the pulling, that's extinction. But the moment he says, "Excuse me," even if his hand is still grasping her shirt, we reinforce him immediately. Why? Because he used the alternative tool. That specific dynamic makes this the Swiss Army knife of our field. It's the primary driver for teaching functional communication because it proves to the learner that the new skill pays off better than the old habit. Think of a radio. You aren't building the circuit board from scratch. The music is already playing. You're just reaching for the volume knob. That is the essence of fine-tuning performance. If you look at the definition right in the center, notice the critical distinction. These tools are not for teaching new skills. We are dealing with a behavior that already exists in the learner's repertoire. The mechanics are there, but the frequency is off. Maybe a student knows how to raise their hand, but they do it every 30 seconds. That's too much. Or perhaps they know how to complete a task, but it takes them an hour instead of 10 minutes. That's too slow. The focus here shifts entirely to how often the behavior occurs. So before we pull a tool from this drawer, look at the bottom section and answer the key question. What is your strategic goal? Do we need to speed the behavior up to build fluency? Do we need to slow it down to make it socially acceptable? Or do we need to gradually phase it out entirely? The direction of the change dictates the procedure we choose. Imagine an employee who completes a task perfectly, but takes 3 times longer than everyone else. Accuracy is present, but functional utility is missing. That is exactly where we open drawer 3, the adjustment tool. We are examining differential reinforcement of higher rates of responding, or DRH. I want you to focus immediately on the core function shield on the left. The strategy here is distinct. We are not teaching a new behavior. We are taking an existing behavior and systematically pressing the gas pedal. Now shift your eyes to the graph on the far right. Notice the step-ladder progression of the trend line. This visualizes the reinforcement trigger. We set a specific floor. The behavior must occur more than a set number of times within a specific interval to earn a reward. If they don't beat the clock, reinforcement is withheld. Look at the clinical snapshot in the center to see this in action. We don't demand instant speed. We might start by reinforcing a client for answering just 3 math problems in 5 minutes. Once they stabilize at that pace, represented by the horizontal lines on the graph, we raise the criterion to 5 problems, then 8. It is essentially interval training for behavior. We use DRH because in the real world, whether in academics or job tasks, being correct often isn't enough. You need to be fluent. This tool bridges the critical gap between simple accuracy and true proficiency. Let's talk about the volume knob of behavior management. Sometimes a behavior isn't inherently wrong, it's just happening entirely too much. This is differential reinforcement of diminishing rates of responding, or DRD. I want you to look at the core function on the left. Notice that the goal here is to systematically decrease a rate. We aren't trying to punish a behavior out of existence immediately, we are carefully dialing it down. Shift your focus to the stair-step graph on the right. This visualizes the strategy perfectly. DRD is a game of lowering the ceiling over time. Initially, the criterion is high. Using the clinical snapshot example, asking a question in the car is fine, but asking every 30 seconds is a problem. So we set a reinforcement trigger. If the child asks fewer than 4 times in 10 minutes, they earn the reward, perhaps some ice cream. Once they master that level, look at how the graph steps down. We lower the limit to 3 questions, then 2. The strategic brilliance here creates the outcome in the clinical use case. If you were to punish a student for asking for help, they might stop asking altogether, which is dangerous for learning. DRD solves this by teaching moderation. We are preserving the behavior itself, but strictly regulating its frequency. We want them to ask for help, just not every single time the wind blows. Imagine a student who is incredibly enthusiastic, raising their hand 30 times in a single class. If you ignore them completely, you crush their spirit. If you answer every time, they dominate the room. This creates a unique challenge. We don't want to stop the behavior, we just need to adjust the frequency. This is where differential reinforcement of lower rates, or DRL, becomes the precise tool for the job. Think of this as a volume knob rather than a mute button. Shift your focus to the graph on the right. Notice that trend line. It drops steeply at first, but then flattens out. Crucially, look at where it ends. It never touches the bottom axis. That gap is intentional. It signifies that the behavior remains active in the person's repertoire, just at a socially acceptable level. Technically, we achieve this by targeting inter-response time. We only provide reinforcement, like calling on the student, after a minimum amount of time has passed since their last attempt. If they respond too quickly, the clock resets. Whether it's rapid eating or dominating a conversation, DRL is the scalpel you use when you want to keep a behavior alive, but simply need it to occupy less space. Behavior intervention isn't about guesswork, it is about precision engineering. What lies before you is the diagnostic blueprint for differential reinforcement, essentially the flowchart for choosing the exact right tool for the job. Start at the very top with your primary goal. If your objective is strictly to wipe out a behavior by reinforcing the times it isn't happening, follow that line to the far left. That lands you on DRO. Notice the icon is a power symbol with a slash. That's your cue. You are reinforcing the power off state of that behavior. Now, shift your focus to the center column. This is usually the gold standard because you aren't just stopping a bad habit, you are building a new one. The critical decision point here is physical compatibility. Ask yourself, can the client do the bad thing and the good thing at the same time? If the answer is yes, use DRA. If the answer is no, because the new behavior physically prevents the old one, you use DRI. Finally, look to the right. This section is for when the behavior itself isn't wrong, but the volume is too loud or too quiet. It's about rate control. If you need to speed things up, that's DRH. But if you need to slow things down, look closely at the distinction between DRL and DRD. Use DRL when the behavior is good in moderation, but use DRD when you want to slowly dial it down until it disappears completely. Memorize this flow. Choosing the wrong schedule isn't just a technical error. It's the difference between frustrating a client and empowering them. Think of behavior intervention like precision engineering. You cannot just throw rewards at a problem and hope it sticks. You need the right tool for the specific job. This diagram perfectly organizes your operational strategy into 3 distinct drawers based on your ultimate goal. Start at the top with the red drawer, elimination. Inside, you find DRO. This is your heavy machinery. Use this when a behavior is dangerous or completely unacceptable. Your goal here is 0 occurrences. You aren't teaching a new skill yet. You are simply reinforcing the absence of the problem. Now look at the middle, blue tier, replacement. This is where true long-term change happens. With DRI and DRA, we acknowledge that you can't just leave a behavioral vacuum. If you take something away, you must give something back. You are actively teaching a functional alternative or an incompatible behavior to fill that void. Finally, focus on the bottom drawer, adjustment. Not every behavior needs to disappear. Sometimes the volume is just too loud or too quiet. DRH, DRD, and DRL allow you to fine-tune frequency, like adjusting a thermostat. Whether you need to increase a shy student's participation or lower the rate of a student who asks for help too often, this is where you calibrate. Don't just pick a reinforcement schedule at random. Decide first, are you eliminating, replacing, or adjusting? That decision dictates the tool.
Behavioral analysis is essentially investment management. You are investing your attention, your currency, into the behaviors you want to see grow, while simultaneously cutting off funding to the behaviors that need to go bankrupt. That's the logic behind the balance scale you see right in the center, reinforcement versus extinction. Let's break this down by function, starting on the far left with Group 1. Focus on the clock icon. This is DRO, Differential Reinforcement of Other Behaviors. This is your zero tolerance zone. We aren't looking for a specific new skill yet. We are simply rewarding the total absence of a problem. If the dangerous behavior, like throwing food, doesn't happen for 5 minutes, the client gets K'd. It's ideal for stopping chaos quickly. Now, shift your eyes to the right, to Group 2. Here we get constructive. We are teaching replacements. You must distinguish between DRI and DRA. Think of DRI as a physical blockade, reinforcing incompatible behaviors. You physically cannot walk around if you are sitting in a chair. They can't happen at the same time. DRA, or alternative behavior, is softer. It's just a better option. Pulling a shirt gets ignored, saying "excuse me" gets attention. Both achieve the goal, but one is polite. Finally, drop down to the bottom tier, Group 3. This is about fine-tuning the volume of an existing behavior. If you need more hustle, use DRH, high rates. We want that student solving more math problems faster. But look closely at the distinction between DRD and DRL in the center and right. This is where most students fail the exam. DRD, or diminishing rates, is for when you want to gradually reduce a behavior, like asking too many questions, aiming to eventually eliminate the excess. DRL, or lower rates, is subtly different. We like the behavior, like hand raising, but it's happening too much. We don't want to kill the enthusiasm, we just want to space it out. Mastering this slide isn't just about memorizing acronyms, it's about knowing whether you need to stop a behavior, replace it, or just adjust the volume.